Hi, Joanna.
Hey, hi, Sangeeta. Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited, very nervous, all of it.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. So we're just gonna give it a couple of minutes to let people join in, and then we'll start.
Sure. Great. Good fun.
Also, if everyone can hear us, can you give us a thumbs up in the comment section, please? Just to make sure they can hear.
Yeah.
So how has your day been, Joanna?
Oh my God. The day has been great, but like I told you, I'm pretty nervous about these things.
Yeah. Thank you, Darshan. Yeah, no, don't worry. Okay, great. People can hear us. I'm glad, because that's always like one of the first things to check. Great. Oh, good. We have people really pouring in, which I'm happy about. So
Yay.
yes, for sure. But
So
I am
congratulations to Tulika also on this new imprint.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm excited to talk about it, but I'm also excited to talk about your book. I was reading it just a while ago, and every time I read it, I end up smiling because it's so, like, I think you've written it so well, and it's just such a lovely story that you
Thank you.
can't help but smile.
Thank you.
Yes. I think we'll give it like one more minute and we can start.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can start. So, hey everyone, welcome to Book Talk. Today is a very special session. So first off, before anything, the first thing we'd like to share is that Tulika is launching a new imprint called Tulika Graphics. So Tulika Graphics is going to be a series of illustrated narratives, which will be for the ages 9 and above. So that doesn't just mean children. So that's children, young adults, and adults. So even if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 80s, your 90s, go ahead and pick a copy, because these stories truly are for everyone and they are beyond age. And we're really going beyond picture books with these series. So you'll find like verse, poetry, fiction, non-fiction, memoirs, biographies, and a bunch of other really cool themes and stories we'll be covering through this. And the first book we are launching in the series is Joeanna Rebello Fernandes's The Block Printed Tiger. Look at that. A lovely book written in verse, and wonderful illustrations by Nina Sabnani and Piyush Verma. And I'm just going to take a moment to show you one of my favorite illustrations from the book, which is this. This is one of my favorite spreads. So yeah, I'm really excited. And before we, talk to Joanna about the book, I'm going to give you a quick introduction about her. So Joanna is a writer. She has been a journalist, and she's been a features writer with the Times of India and various other magazines. She has authored 2 other children's books, Treasure at the Train Station and Journey to the Edge of the Earth. And The Block Printed Tiger is her first book with Tulika. It's also her first picture book, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome, Joanna. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you.
So Joanna, I think the first thing I want to ask you about the book is that this is a story about a runaway tiger from Ranthambore. You talk about prints, block prints, and the Jaipur Bazaar. How did you get the idea to sort of write this story and also to set it in Rajasthan?
Okay, Sangeeta, so before I answer that question, can I sort of give everyone a short summary of what the book is about?
Oh, of course, please.
Yeah?
Please
Okay,
go ahead.
great.
Yeah.
So The Block Printed Tiger is the story of a tiger called Farooqi, who lives in Ranthambore, which is not too far from Jaipur city. And Farooqi is growing old. He has grown old. His fur is fusty and it's sort of falling out in patches. And he decides he's going to get himself a new cat suit. And he says, I'm going to do something radical, something no other animal has done before. He comes to Bapu Bazaar in Jaipur city, and he's determined to get himself a cat suit made of block printed fabric, which is what Jaipur is famous for, Rajasthan is famous for. So that's the story. It's a story about this tiger and the adventure he has in Bapu Bazaar when he's shopping for block printed fabric. Okay, so that's the story. Now, how did I come to think about the idea? Like all good things, this idea took root in a forest. A couple of years ago, I decided to spend a birthday in Ranthambore National Park, and on one of the safaris, I sighted a tiger, and this it was the experience was electric, and as it turned out, the tiger's name was Bijli, so truly electric. And I spotted Bijli, we sighted Bijli not once on that trip, but twice. And each time I was just like blown away. And on one of those sightings, she was sitting in a watering hole, you know, completely self-possessed, regal, totally impervious to this throng, this crush of tourists around her. And the memory is sort of seared in my mind. Till date, I get goosebumps when I think about this tiger sitting in that watering hole. Anyway, a couple of months later, I am invited to Jaipur to conduct a creative writing workshop for children. And one of those modules was a poetry writing session. So as homework, at the end of that session, I asked the children to write a story about a tiger from Ranthambore who decides to come to Jaipur city. And that's it. That's all I told them. And I said to them, to keep you company, I'll write a poem myself. So the next day, we'll all read our poems together. So that's how, that's where the seed for this poem was planted. And I slowly sort of teased it out even after I came back home. And that's the story of the block printed tiger who goes shopping to Bapu Bazaar.
Yeah, which is such a quirky concept, right? And even the book is it's so fun that way, which is one of the things I love. And it's just, I really recommend the book because it's honestly such a fun read. And on that note, I would like to read a couple of lines from the book. I don't know if I'll read it as well as you, Joanna, but I will attempt.
I'm sure you're gonna do really well. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so before my next question, I want to read these few lines and you'll know why. So here goes. Chin on paw, claw on cheek, Farooqi strolled past the bales, examining the fabric with his feeler of a tail. He felt the muslins, the linens, the cottons and the silks. I'll be exceptional, he cried, my own solitary ilk. So first off, there's, so much rhythm in the lines that you have written, which is what I love, and the fact that it's written in verse. And though, yes, this is something you did in a poetry writing workshop, right, to keep your students company. But, I'm just wondering if, at any point you felt maybe that even though it has been written in verse, if you felt like converting it to any other form, why did you kind of decide to stick to the story in verse? And, what were the possibilities you were seeing, considering that there were so many other ways you could have written it? And was it challenging? Was it enjoyable for you?
So for one, none of those other ways spoke to me. Okay. They say you are what you eat. For me, it's I write what I read. And at the time, I was reading a lot of children's poetry. So I was reading Julia Donaldson and Roald Dahl and Lewis Carroll. And I had such fun reading those poems that I said, I'm sure I'm going to have fun writing this too. And I'd never written stories in verse before. So I said, let me give it a go, let me try. And I started, and then I discovered something called a rhyming dictionary, which there are all kinds of dictionaries, so I shouldn't have been surprised to find a rhyming dictionary, but I found one. And it was a great tool to have. So, I really recommend it to anybody who wants to write poetry and wants to write rhyming poetry, to get hold of a rhyming dictionary. It really helps. So in any case, I've always been drawn to rhythm in writing. I've been a journalist I was a journalist for many years, over 15. And I found, to my surprise, that I used to use a lot of alliteration, and sometimes even rhymes. I mean, and not intentionally, they sort of just slip through. But that's when I realized that I enjoyed creating and discovering rhythm in writing. But writing this poem was just really all fun. You asked me if it was challenging. No, it wasn't challenging. It was just like such a joy to do. I wrote 2 other subsequent stories in verse, but the one thing I discovered writing in verse was, you start out with an idea, you have a plot in mind, you know what your character wants to do, but as you're telling that story in verse, because you want to rhyme, that is, if you want to rhyme, which is what I like to do, sometimes a rhyming word may take you in a completely different direction. So you hadn't anticipated, you hadn't planned for this, but the rhyming words decide that they're going to take hold of the story and they're going to create a new plot line. So, for example, you want to write a story about a goat in a boat that wants to cross a moat. Okay. And as you're writing it, you come, another word comes to mind, throat. So you think about a goat in a boat trying to cross a moat, but suddenly it's got something stuck in its throat. So you've got a plot twist there. So you see what I mean? You've got these words, and that's the fun I had when I wrote the poem, because, I kind of had a broad idea of where Farooqi was going and what he was going to do. And as I started to think about rhyming words, I said, oh, I could, this is something new he will now do, only because it makes such a great rhyme.
No, but that's wonderful. And it really comes through how much fun you must have had, because I think as readers, you have so much fun, like kind of even going through this story. It's such a joyride, honestly. But also, this is your first picture book that you have worked on. What was different for you about working on a picture book in terms of, the process? And also, did you think this story would be for children while writing it?
Yes, I did. I did write it for children. It came out of a children's writing workshop, so I had children in mind. But I didn't think it was going to be a picture book. Like, I didn't have that goal in mind. I just wanted to write a fun story in verse. Now, to my luck, to my incredibly good luck, Farooqi from the book decided to set off on a journey that was going to be colorful and that made for interesting visuals. So the book and the story, I think, naturally lent itself to the format of a picture book. So when it was done, I decided to send it to Tulika, and I was really fortunate that you guys liked the story and you all went ahead and published it. So that's the story of the book. But you mentioned the two other books I'd written before. Treasure of the Train Station and Journey to the Edge of the Earth. Both are chapter books, one longer than the other, both written in prose. But writing this was a completely different exercise, right? It was a different format altogether. But what I realized when writing this, the things that I had to keep in mind were, and one, an economy of words, right? Yeah. I had to keep the story taut. I had to narrate a series of events swiftly in quick succession. I didn't want to draw them out. And I had to make sure that the rhyme scheme was consistent throughout, right? And while I never paid any attention to my grammar lessons in school, so those lessons on prosody, I mean, everything over my head. But now when I was writing this, I had to actually pay attention to meter, to make sure that the meter was not faulty, to make sure that the sentence structure was not clunky. And I had to narrate the poem out loud. So not sort of just read it, but really narrate it like I was narrating it for an audience a couple of times to be able to spot lines that were jarring, arrhythmic lines. So that's the process of writing the story.
No, that's amazing. And I always love hearing, writers talk about, the way they kind of go about writing, a piece of work that they have created. So it was great to kind of hear that. But also, like I mentioned earlier, you worked as a features writer for Times of India and also several other magazines. And of course, the themes and subjects you're writing about, they are very different from, children's writing. How did you decide to kind of write for children, and how different has it been for you to work in children's literature?
I'm an accidental children's writer. Okay. I didn't set off to write children's books. I was really fortunate to be invited to write the first one, and then invited again to write the second one. And I jumped at the opportunity both times. But by then I had learned a thing or two about writing for children's books. So I said, I'm going to have a go at this myself. So I did. I mean, nobody invited me to write this. I did this myself. But I've been writing. I had written for magazines and for a newspaper for about 15 years. And the switch to writing children's stories was really like switching gears when you're driving a car. So up until then, I was working in fourth gear, with deadlines that came and went like really quickly. And now I started to work in second gear. And it was a pace that I thoroughly enjoyed. It gave me more room to think. It gave me more space to invent and to imagine. So I just love this process. The other thing is I was now creating stories. I was not just reporting them, right? So that was something else I really enjoyed. But a lesson I learned as I made the switch, and a lesson I have to, these are lessons that I have to keep that keep coming up. Was one, I was so accustomed to telling that I now had to show and not tell. So in writing children's books, it was a lesson I had to keep reminding myself, show, don't tell, and to use more dialogue. So even to date, it's a sort of a constant note to self, write more dialogue. I tend not to do that. So that is it. And, at the end of the day, when I thought in the straight and narrow, because you're writing for a newspaper, you're writing column inches. So it was really just thinking in the straight and narrow. My mind has now rearranged itself into a playground. So I'm not thinking in the straight and narrow. I think I'm thinking more monkey bar right now.
I love that analogy of the playground. I think that's amazing the way you put it across. But yeah, Joanna, it's great to kind of hear, your kind of process behind the book. And I think it really shows. I'm just going to kind of show it to audience members who may not have seen it yet. This is the block printed tiger. But on that note, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for being here, Joanna. This was an absolute pleasure. I had so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita. Even I had like a great time. Thanks so much. And thank you everybody for joining in.
And before signing off, please don't forget to pre-order the block printed tiger. It is now available for pre-orders and it will be out for orders very soon. We have a 30% off as well, which is valid till the 20th of November. After which the book will officially be coming out, and we will be announcing that. So stay tuned to all our social media handles, our mailer, website, everything. You'll find out all the information as and when it comes out. So thank you so much for being here, guys. This was great fun. And thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, Sangeeta. I'm so glad to have done this. And I appreciate everybody who's joined this Insta Live. Thank you so much. And thanks, Sulika.